We're not doing this just for some tech accomplishment, but we're doing it to solve the challenges of people and planet.
The thing that had been the AI test forever just went whooshing by.
We've increased the energy efficiency of computing by 10,000 times.
Today, we're launching GPT-5.
Gemini 3,
Llama 4,
Claude, Grok 4.
It's the worst it'll ever be.
All right, welcome to the Future Live today, March 27, 2026. It's a Friday, and I'm Matt Berman, and we actually have a guest host today, very special guest host. Nick is moving to San Francisco today, so he's doing that, and we have Hiten Shah. Welcome, Hiten.
Thanks for having me again. Happy to be here.
Welcome back, I should say. That's right. So super excited for our show today. We have a very special guest, Jonathan Siddharth, founder and CEO of Turing. So we're going to talk to him, and we're just going to have fun and talk a lot about all the news stories that happened this week. So I think we should just get right into that.
Let's do it.
All right. So yeah, the main story, or the top story, we're saying goodbye to Sora. Maybe you saw this coming, Hiten, but to everyone who created with Sora, shared it, and built community around it, thank you. So if you're not familiar, Sora originally was their text to video model, maybe the first world model that we saw. But then they turned it into a social network. And then it became obvious Sora and OpenAI, they were just doing so many different things, investing in so many different projects. This is kind of Sam Altman's multiple bet strategy. And then Fiji Simo, the CEO of applications, maybe that title has changed, took over, said, hey, we're going to have a renewed focus now. And so I wanted to get your thoughts, Hiten. What do you think about Sora shutting down?
It was a consumer app, and if consumer apps don't grow, they get shut down. And that's like the historical, that to me, that's like the top level of this sort of situation of them shutting it down, is like it wasn't growing fast enough. Like if these consumer things don't grow fast enough, they're not worth keeping. If you don't have the energy or resources or want to go push more into it, then they're not going to grow faster. This is all like the stuff we grew up with around growth hacking and all that kind of stuff. Like that's what that discipline is. So from an operational tactical standpoint and business strategy, why would they keep running something that they don't believe they can grow anymore? So that's one piece. The second thing I'll say is maybe it was an untenable problem to solve, where it's just copyright nightmare everywhere. Like that's another piece of this that I would kind of add and say, I think those are the two factors that come to mind.
Yeah, I think what's a little surprising to me is they're not only shutting down the Sora social aspect, the social app, but they're not going to offer a video model anymore. And that was really special. I remember when I saw Sora for the first time, I was absolutely blown away. It was truly a physics simulator. And so they're not even going to offer it over the API anymore. I agree with you. I think there's also the function of it was really expensive to run. And yeah, if nobody's using it, why would they continue? But it's just, it was a lot of fun at first. And then, no, I never used it after that. Did you end up using it at all, or for a prolonged period of time?
It was really fun making videos of friends and putting them in the videos for a minute. But that gets old at some point once you see a lot of it. And then you start wondering whether these videos should even be made. So I think there's like a psychological thing that was probably going on with people because it's such a new thing. One other thing I think that really you're pointing out is, or you hinted at, is like maybe they just don't have enough GPUs for this stuff, and they want to throw the GPUs at other problems. That might be a real thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a real thing. We're going to get to that in a moment. Do you think there's a company that can pull off something like this? And of course, you know who I'm thinking about is Meta. Like, can Meta pull off a social network built around AI? I know they've been talking a lot about it, uh, specifically video, which is incredibly expensive, GPU costly to generate these videos. Is there a market there? Is there a business model there where video generation as a social network can be a thing?
I mean, I think YouTube has proven that there's only lightweight social functionality around video that even over however many years that they've discovered, because I wouldn't say it's a social network in the traditional sense. It has social features. So I guess for me, you're gonna find this funny, but like I think we're relying on human creativity going up to
Yuck.
possibly answer that question, right? Because people have to make things that are worthy of watching. And I'm not sure if that model proved that us making things ourselves with prompting is worthy of watching.
So is this like peak slop? Is that what we saw? And all of a sudden we're having this course correction back to human taste, which kind of makes sense actually. I hadn't thought of it like that.
We don't want more slop. It's like at some point you get tired of junk food too, right? It reminds me, you know what? It's funny you say that. It reminds me of all those people that tried eating like McDonald's for a month. Like, did we just eat McDonald's while using Sora? Like, is that the same equivalent, right? For a prolonged period of time and then realize it's probably not good for us?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. So it seems like okay, image generation still very popular, but it's very clear when an image is generated by artificial intelligence, at least like most of the time. And then we have video generation where it was really clear. And so there's almost like this lack of appetite for additional AI slop, maybe more sensitivity to it. But these AI videos still go mega viral on Instagram and TikTok. I mean, stuff where, crazy videos that are so obviously AI and they really do very well. And then there's also this entire group of AI influencers that are growing in popularity. Are those bound for the same destiny here, of just kind of people get sick of the slop and they want it back? They want to go back to human taste, human connection.
That's a really good I guess my argument I would make is that if it went viral, it's not slop. Like
What about the
like
novelty? Is it like, did it go viral because it was novel? And once people get used to it, it's like, okay, what else do you have?
well, then we're talking about marketing, right? Like
Yeah.
channels fatigue over time, creative fatigues over time. So when you were speaking of that, it reminded me of friends of mine that are probably going to be really bummed out that the Sora API is gone because they were using it for their Instagram and all that, and I'm sure they're looking for alternative. And what they had told me when I was talking to them about what models they use and what systems they use to make their AI generated videos, they were saying Sora actually beat everything else.
So
So
it was really good. It
So
was,
I think it's creativity that we're talking about. Again, I think it's just straight up like if someone is creative and understands virality and how to, create a video that people will watch, I think that someone is you as well, right? Like you create videos and people watch them and there's a whole production behind it, topics, hooks, scripts, all that stuff. That hasn't gone away. This is just a tool to help us create things, period. But then if we know how to create things and have the taste and judgment, this accelerates our ability to have, let's say, more of these.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's real.
Yeah, I agree. I love that thought. There's obviously so many people talking about how AI is going to replace artists and video content creators and everybody else. But what I'm seeing is there was this again, like this initial boom of AI and this initial virality around it. But ultimately, we still have to get back to the basics: storytelling, taste, the connection, and yeah. I mean, ultimately, what's like the story is the thing that matters when it comes to video. What story are you telling? Is it a compelling story? And if not, it doesn't really matter. This is just a tool like anything else.
Exactly.
So I think the other thing that we should mention, oh, that's not it. Let's see. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay. So the other piece of this is Disney uh, had a huge announcement at the Sora release, which is they were partnering with OpenAI. Disney was partnering with OpenAI so that you can actually use Disney IP in the Sora app. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but let's get into it a little bit more. The IP issue was probably pretty significant, and it is very difficult to prevent IP from leaking into Sora videos. It's basically impossible, right? If you can prompt hack a model, which you can, there's just no way to prevent it. These things are non-deterministic by nature, and you can prompt hack them. Then there is a way to create IP that wasn't authorized by the IP holder. So the thing that's really interesting is let's talk about first Disney partnering with them. Do you think as like part of this shutdown is because they couldn't control the IP?
I personally believe yes. I felt that the second I saw it. How do you control the IP? Like how? Like what are the technical like methods that would make all the IP holders happy? And then you just start walking through that and you're like, wait, are you saying you're going to give IP holders access to be able to know when and where their IP is being used across this kind of generation system? That again, it's an untenable problem, probably, and it's probably not lucrative enough with, how much it costs today to generate the video. They were probably all either expecting more GPUs or it to go down in price, or the traction to kind of, inflect or the growth to inflect. Thus, it all just works out, right? The math will work out if you can grow something. If you can't
Yeah.
grow something, usually it won't work out. And they might have just hit the problem. But I think this licensing thing might be what's actually underneath a lot of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. If the numbers are there, they're not shutting this down. That like simple as that. So the other interesting thing, very interesting. So according to the information, the shutdown of Sora prompted Walt Disney Co. to abandon a planned $1 billion investment in OpenAI related to a Sora licensing agreement struck last December. That's very interesting. Now, if I'm Disney, I'm like, I still want my $1 billion investment. I still want my piece of OpenAI. But why would they have dropped this? Who do you think initiated the cancellation of the investment? It seems more likely it was Disney, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe Disney just wanted to focus, just like OpenAI seems to want to do. What do you think's going on here?
Um, these partnerships tend to be dependent on something very specific. And I think that specific thing just went away.
Yeah.
And I think that Disney wanting to invest in OpenAI was probably helping them so they can say, hey, we're doing something about AI.
Them being Disney.
Disney, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think it helps OpenAI as much as it helps Disney. Except with the caveat that if they're working on Sora and they want Disney characters in there and they want to have Disney be, a big part of how they maybe get growth. Because like if you think you have to I think you have to put a growth lens on this stuff on both sides. So for Disney, they want to seem cool. I mean, they're cool. They're still Disney, so no criticism there. But like they want to seem cool and be doing AI stuff and be forward thinking. So I can imagine execs at OpenAI convincing them. I don't think that's very hard, especially when they have something like Sora and they're like, we want to play ball with you. Then you have OpenAI side of it where it's like, we don't have the thing you wanted to pay us for anymore. We're not going to continue pursuing it. So does it make sense? So it's almost like if it truly was a real agreement, then there's just an amicable way to get out of it if the thing that you agreed upon is no longer relevant. And I think that I'm just trying to explain it really simply to see if there's any other noise outside of that. But that feels like the simplest explanation for what is probably happening here.
So I want to expand on this a little bit. Do you think okay, Sora is shutting down. Text to video still very popular. We have a lot of open source models that are great. We have Runway, which has fantastic video models. Is this just, as you said, going to be a tool for video production companies? And then something that I do believe in is kind of this fan fiction segment of the market. I really believe in that. There's like tons of fan fiction around IP like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and a million of them, right? And so AI gives small creators the ability to create incredible pieces of content based on fan fiction. Now, obviously, there's the IP issue to contend with. Fan fiction, I think, is in this weird gray area. It's not really policed that hard, but when you start having video that has the potential to go absolutely viral, then all of a sudden IP holders are looking at it much more closely. So, what do you think about this whole fan fiction part of the market?
I think there's subsections of what Sora did, like submarkets or subcategories that have always existed. Fan fictions existed for a very long time. So, doubling down on what you're saying, is this technology going to help with the evolution of that category of entertainment? Because it's entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the answer is yes. The question is when and how, and what are we going to have to contend with? And now we don't think it's going to be OpenAI getting any of that if they're going to shut this down. So then I think it opens up so many other opportunities for so many companies to actually partner with these media companies. So my thesis, if you just want to go all the way there, is that the Disneys of the world are IP holders. They have great IP. That IP now can be used by any individual almost instantly, almost anywhere. Gemini, other models, all kinds of stuff. So there has to be companies that bridge the gap. So what I got excited about was OpenAI and Sora potentially bridging that gap. Now, there's probably going to be some other companies that come out that are going to be able to bridge that gap, because Disney, I can't imagine Disney just sitting there and saying, we're not going to do anything about this.
No, no, absolutely not. I think you're right. They have to do something. There's so much value to be captured there by allowing these lifelong Disney fans to do more. And I actually am a big believer that there's an entire market to have these like mini creators, mini celebrities where they take existing IP. They're just such big loyal fans of the existing IP. They create offshoots. They create they create fan fiction from that, and then they put it out, and then they develop a following. They're almost like micro creators. And I don't know. It just seems like all of that funnels back into Disney's value. So why wouldn't they take advantage of it? Why wouldn't they acquire the model or the research behind it, or like I don't know. It just seems a little weird that it's just like, well, we're done.
You're making me think Disney should launch a social media site or a social network that lets people do approved generations,
Yeah.
right? And only you can do it there. Anywhere else, it's not legit or approved or has the automatic licensing. We might be in a world where that's where we go, because when you think about all the social networks and all that out there, they're all very generic now. Even Reddit is pretty like wide, right? You go there for anything. So you can imagine some situation where Disney and maybe other IP holders start putting out their own stuff. I mean, look at it this way. They were already paying companies to help them build microsites for their movies and stuff like that. They were already doing a lot of creative work around little games and things like that. I mean, toys are already a big thing, right, off this IP. So in some ways, I think at some point, someone is going to figure this out and start pitching them, or they're going to figure it out themselves and start building something along the lines of what you're saying. I mean, it has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to move on to the next section of this information article, and I think you have something to say. So let me tee you up on this. Altman also said the company would be renaming senior executive Fiji Simo. So when I said this is the Fiji Simo focus effect, that's who I was referencing. Formerly CEO of applications, now she's going to be named senior executive of the product organization to AGI deployment. AGI deployment, very interesting. A reference to artificial general intelligence, or AI, that's roughly on par with humans. Last week, by the way, we can argue whether that's the proper definition of AGI or not. But last week, the company told employees that it would create a desktop super app by combining ChatGPT with its coding agent Codex and browser Atlas. All right, so there's a lot of things to talk about here, Heaton. I want to get your thoughts first on the Fiji Simo focus effect. Obviously, a few weeks ago, she talked about the need for significant focus because OpenAI has made so many different bets. So first, thoughts on that?
I think late last year, well, not late last year, probably like mid to late last year, everyone in the labs, everyone's probably a little too pushy, but let's say the folks that were working on the application layer and were like either labs or like, let's say a Perplexity comes to mind, or even Google Labs, or I think Anthropic didn't kind of join this race as much, but there was just a race to add a lot of things. That's all I'm trying to refer to. There's a race to add a lot of things. I actually believe Perplexity is a company that actually pushed everyone to just ship, right? That's why we have so many different browsers. I don't know if we need them. That's a different story. And as a result, these companies put out a lot of stuff. But the thing is, if you think about a company and a larger organization, the energy goes towards things that are working.
Yeah.
Especially when you have so many eyeballs and so many things. So in my mind, the role change or the title change for an executive like this, especially a very senior executive, has to go along with strategic changes in the organization and the company. But I just want to take a quick step back and say this is probably more related to the three companies that should go public this year, trying to make sure that they're able to go public and actually have a successful IPO. And that's
OpenAI, Anthropic. Who's the third?
SpaceX.
SpaceX. Yep.
Right? And we don't know now. I think there's a bunch of articles coming out, but when I was talking to a bunch of friends of mine that knew about this a few months ago, they're like, might just not be enough money in the market. And you might say, how does this relate to an executive change? Well, the optics in the company was she was responsible for applications. I think you had reminded me of that earlier, which is like head of applications, CEO of applications, or something like that. Now, just take the word applications and now take the word AGI deployment, right? Applications would imply that it's being deployed as applications probably for anyone, consumers, enterprise, etc. But when you say AGI deployment, you're talking about deploying it for enterprises and businesses more than you are anyone else, right? So this is, again, just almost an optic switch as part of whatever reorg they're trying to do so they can reorient around enterprise for a simple reason that we all know, which is right now, Anthropic has the enterprise in a way that OpenAI does not.
Yeah. So let me maybe recap the history a little bit. You call me out if I get anything wrong.
I'll try.
OpenAI shipping like crazy early last year. I had a little bit of fumble with 4.5. Then all of a sudden GPT-5 came out. It's amazing. Simultaneously, they have made so many different strategic bets. Whether you're talking about hardware or a browser or Sora or XYZ different permutations of their core model. And then all of a sudden Anthropic comes in. Not all of a sudden, but they start to gain momentum, and they are hyper focused from not only a strategic point of view, but also a cultural point of view. And they're just going hard on coding models. Opus 4.5 comes out, Sonnet 4.5 comes out. These models are best in class for coding. But why? Why did they decide to go so hard on coding? Well, it turns out coding allows the company to build tools to train future models. So they are kind of in this interesting flywheel. And then simultaneously, when they're building coding models and they're able to sell to enterprise, that is real revenue, they take that revenue and also reinvest that back into the model creation. So you have all of these different things working. But the real thing I want to point out is their hyper focus. Sell to enterprise, get revenue. Take that revenue, build future models. And at the same time, build tools that allow them to ship models more quickly. And then they're gaining steam. They're getting all the press. And OpenAI looks and they're like, dang, we have Sora. Sora's not really getting any traction, and it's certainly not in the press anymore. Or, hey, we had the Atlas browser, and maybe not a lot of people are using it. I actually don't know that. Maybe we should focus in. And they kind of see the vision of Anthropic, of like those three different pillars of the flywheel feeding into each other. And eventually it all leads to AGI. Like that's the ultimate goal for these companies. And so they're looking at Anthropic, they see it, they see the strategy, the focus, and they say, hey, we probably have to do a little bit of this. We have limited compute. We are already we already have this internal tension between product and research, but now we're also having the tension between all the other different products that we're launching or have launched and need to support. And so they made the very smart decision to start paring down their offerings and focusing their compute. So I'm going to stop there for a second. What do you think?
It all tracks, right? If one company figured out what the loop is and what the growth model is, and what you're saying sounds actually really good, and I think a lot of people had the theory, but Anthropic has put it in practice, and the numbers are showing it. So, and again, we don't know if we'll get to AGI this way, and like you said, the definition of AGI, but overall, I think your thesis makes a lot of sense, and I would say that, like, if Anthropic has figured it out, then OpenAI has to too. But I'll still go back to the fact these companies are trying to go public, and we have to really, like, understand who they're appealing to. I think they're trying to appeal to basically the bankers who are now comparing these companies to each other. And SpaceX is the one neither of the two can be compared to at this point, so they'll be fine, so to speak. So then it's basically Anthropic and OpenAI duking it out in the eyes of the bankers, who are the ones that are going to be helping push it for an IPO, right? So if we work backward from there, I think all these things are optics, first of all. So that piece, let's put that aside, because that's what this article, I think, was mostly about, which is this is the optics that OpenAI wants out there, right? Like, that's usually what press is helpful for, except when press gives you a hard time as a company. But the second piece is what you're talking about, which is, what is a real AI flywheel for a lab? That's really what you're saying, right? And if Anthropic's figured out there's enterprise money here and we know how to get it, and OpenAI hasn't been able to get that with the attempts they've made, because they've had actually an interesting one. Again, I'll go to the side here. I don't think we have it, and we're planning on covering it, but it's a worthy data point, is that it finally came out that the ads that OpenAI had in ChatGPT were not working for the advertisers. And I only say finally because if you're in the marketing circles and you start talking to CMOs and stuff, you start hearing stuff about the results of the Super Bowl ads, or, compared to the OpenAI ChatGPT ads that they launch. And it's finally out that they haven't worked yet. There's a lot of arguments to be made, early platform, all kinds of things like that. Fine. Let's put that aside. We're in a world of now. These companies have tried, these big companies have tried, these CPG companies, et cetera, have tried ads. The ads have not worked. So that can't be something that OpenAI goes out and says, hey, this is going to work. This is going to scale. This is how we're going to make more and more money. So then what's left? Because if it's not ads for consumers, it's direct monetization with consumers. OpenAI doesn't want to be in that business, except they already are with ChatGPT, and they have the lion's share of that. So then what else do they do next? And Anthropic seemed to have just sideswiped and said, no, we care about enterprise more than we care about consumers. That's kind of the feeling I get as a both consumer and a work user. They pivoted more of their business to work use cases and less of it to what you do with ChatGPT and consumer use cases.
Yeah. Consumer's hard. I mean, there are very few companies who crack it at scale. As a multi-time founder yourself, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you've almost exclusively gone after enterprise, right?
Yeah, I've invested in literally 1,000 companies, and so I've seen, like, hardware, CPG, consumer, lots of B2B SaaS, and even deeper enterprise, like infrastructure stuff. And ultimately, like, where you're more likely to succeed with the higher chances is B2B. Like, that's just always been the case. Part of the reason, though, again, I don't want to date myself and go back in history too much, but I'm just going to do it real quick, is that every time something comes out that can essentially take a lot of consumer attention away, Facebook does, or Meta does, their best job at trying to grab it one way or another, and they will go at it for a very long time, because they're simply looking at, are people spending time on our products? Are they spending time on other products? And if they're not spending time on our products, but they're spending time on other products, we should do what those other products are doing into our products, so they spend that time that they're spending over there with our products, right? And so I think one of the well-known secrets in the Valley is that Meta wants to make sure that no consumer products are larger than theirs, or even exist if they can help it, right? You look at their values, you look at like how the companies run. They're not inventive of this type of stuff. They're finding things out there and doing it. I mean, I don't know if you talked about this, but the Moltbook acquisition by Meta
Oh
kind
yeah.
of signifies their strategy in some ways.
Yeah. That no, I don't think we talked about it, but very interesting. I think it was reported 200 million. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, Moltbook, which kind of rode on the back of the OpenClaw popularity, got acquired by Facebook. Matt Schlitt, also his co-founder are going over there, basically thinking probably just about the future of agents and social networking. So yeah, I see the strategy. We've seen it a number of times. They've been very successful at it, but I think the overall point is consumers hard. Consumers are very fickle. Enterprise, you ship code, they pay you for it. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than that in my mind. So that is what they figured out here. I'm glad that they're having focus. I like the competition and that flywheel of selling to enterprise, building coding models, and then building tools to build the models. It's so beautiful, and you can see the result, right? The Claude team is shipping features, major features, every single day. It's almost like I feel bad for their competitors, um, but like I've never seen a company ship so much. But okay, so we have time for I think one more story before we bring our first guest on. I think what's interesting is there's just been a lot of talk about white collar bloodbath and layoffs and there's this like split story here where you're seeing Block lay off a ton, Oracle lay off a ton, even Meta's laying off some, although a small percentage of their total workforce. But then you have Anthropic, or sorry, well, certainly Anthropic, but you have OpenAI planning to almost double its headcount by the end of 2026. So the company that could literally automate themselves to AGI is not doing it. And I think this is really important. So the new hires will largely work across product development, engineering, research, and sales. They've taken new office space in San Francisco. And yeah, they're hiring like crazy. But again, very different from what we're seeing in other parts of the market. So Meta's cutting, Oracle's cutting, Block, Jack Dorsey's company just cut half. Where do you think this divergence in strategy is coming from?
One, it's companies at different scale, right? And companies that have been around longer and commercializing longer. And so I think the strategy, it also goes back to optics, right? Like one example, and this is just very simple example. One reason Meta might be cutting it, and I know this was a relatively small cut, but right before this, they did a much larger cut, I believe, not too long ago.
Reality
But
Labs. Yep.
yeah, what I was going to say is if they spend so much money on Reality Labs and it hasn't produced the kind of revenue the company wants, and now the company's investing in data centers and a bunch of other stuff, and the company's getting a lot of legal heat at the same time, and there's fines coming for them, they have to do something to save money. And they have to do something to explain to the market they're saving money. I know there's other reasons, but that would be the first one I would say that I would throw when I look at an article like this or look at some of the things that are happening and try to compare the two. I think they're doing it for different reasons. Like OpenAI has to say we need more money because we're going to hire more people, right? And we're going to go after enterprise and we're serious about it. Meta basically needs to say that regardless of how much money we're going to be spending on things we didn't expect to, or things that are like fines or other things like that, or that we've spent in the past, we still want to spend money in these areas. Well, can you justify it if you have all these costs and fines and things like that? You have to let people go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I have to give props to Zuckerberg. He is just forever in founder mode, right? I mean, he can turn this tanker ship of a company around on a dime, right? I believe he still has complete control over the decision making of the
Yeah.
company, right? He has oh shoot,
Voting rights, the
voting
second,
rights,
yeah,
right, super voting
class,
rights.
class, yeah, super voting rights.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's like, oh man, that's
And for anyone watching that doesn't know, that means that the founder has like 10x the votes for each share compared to every other investor, roughly
Yeah.
speaking.
You don't hear about that very much anymore from like other startups doing that. That was very much a like what was that like the 2000s, late 2000s, early 2010s founder shares, super voting rights. That was huge, but eventually when you started getting to Series A, Series B, Series C, your board would say like, "All right, relinquish those." But Zuck kept it throughout till today as a top 5 most valuable company in the world, or I think. Um, and yeah, he's still leveraging it. So massive change into VR AR, then another massive change away from it into spending billions and millions of dollars on AI. So he is just throwing his weight around, and there aren't many companies of this size that can change course as quickly as Meta. And so shout out to the Zuck.
I mean, they make like $20 billion a month. I think some number like that. Don't quote me, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah. It must be nice to have this like money printing machine as you're going out and making all these crazy bets, right? Google has that luxury as well. They are printing money like crazy, so they're like, okay, well, let's subsidize our AI costs, let's invest in our own silicon, let's do all these bets. OpenAI, kind of back to the focus, and Anthropic cannot do that. They don't have the cash cow. They don't have the greatest the greatest cash printing machine of all time known as Google AdSense, right? They don't have that stuff. So they have to be more precise. They have to be more mindful about the bets that they make. And so Meta does have it though, right? They make a ton of money, as you said.
Well,
All right.
and that's why the incumbents don't need to focus in the same way that the startups do. And I think that's the lesson a lot of these companies are learning in 2026.
That's right. Um, so Heaton, I think we should bring on our first guest,
Let's do it.
um, our only guest for the show. So Jonathan Siddharth, founder and CEO of Turing, which is an AI infrastructure company. They are valued at 2.2 billion, and they know and invest a lot into creating data for AI. And so we're going to learn all about that. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. Nice meeting you, Hiten.
Nice meeting you too.
All right. So, first, for those who don't know, give us an overview of what Turing does and how you started it.
Great. So our mission at Turing is to accelerate superintelligence advancement and deployment. So we want to accelerate superintelligence in a way that drives real economic progress. And we do that in 2 ways. First, we work with all the frontier AI labs to generate the highest quality data, RL environments, evals, to improve the models in 3 areas: coding, enterprise, and frontier STEM. And in doing that, we become a differentiated deployment partner in the enterprise, where we work with companies like Apollo, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Fiserv, all these big companies, and build end-to-end AI systems where we have almost like a Palantir for AGI tech business. And by building these systems, we see where these models and agents break and use those learnings to help improve the frontier model. So the models become smarter. Then we solve even bigger problems in enterprise, see where things break, do error analysis, use that to inform our data strategy to improve the frontier models, and execute this loop. So we're building the superintelligence accelerator by being a trusted bridge between research and deployment, between frontier AI and enterprise AI. And on the frontier AI side, we work with like all the frontier labs that build these world models, as well as a whole bunch of neo labs now, these smaller models that are, or rather these labs that are taking non-LLM based approaches to building superintelligence. So it's super fun to operate at both of these ends of the spectrum.
So Jonathan, Heaton and I spent the last 20 minutes talking about Anthropic and OpenAI and their, Anthropic's original focus on coding models, enterprise, and coding tooling. And then now OpenAI's renewed focus on those same things. And it almost overlaps identically with what you just described as the focus of Turing. So why, like, tell us what your thoughts are. Why did you decide those are the areas you're going to focus on for RL, for data creation? And talk about the broader market and this kind of focus away from consumer and really on the enterprise.
Yeah. So Matthew, I mentioned three things: coding, enterprise, and frontier STEM. And I think those three are critically important for AI to drive real economic progress. So starting with coding, automating coding is the key to, so coding is important for a few reasons. Number one, automating coding is the key to accelerating AI research itself. I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, Claude Code is so good now, and OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind, Meta, all these are customers of ours. Our data has gone into improving many of these models. The It is such a competitive advantage that the top labs, I think some of them are already doing this. They restrict access to their coding models into some of the other folks building models too.
Yeah,
because
we've
that's
seen
how much of an-
Anthropic do that pretty aggressively.
that's how much of an accelerator that is. So number one reason, if you believe that the fastest path to superintelligence is to automate AI research itself, then you should care about coding. Second, there have been some research that shows that when the models improve in coding and math, they actually improve in out-of-domain performance in other areas that have nothing to do with coding. So coding seems foundational to general intelligence in ways we don't fully understand. So the models improve in coding benchmarks. They also end up improving in physics, chemistry, biology, and some of these other areas. Some researchers believe it's because coding trains people to think step by step, be much more logical, think of a plan, in coding, you kind of learn some different frameworks for problem solving that perhaps transfer, but that's a little more hand wavy than I'm used to, but empirically it seems to work. The third reason coding is important is Hiten, you and I probably remember this from like a decade or so ago, this whole thesis of software eating the world, right? Mark Andreessen's famous essay.
Yep.
So if you believe that software is eating work and AI is eating software, ergo, like AI is gonna eat work, right? So if you get the coding models to be super good, you'll actually end up automating a lot of different enterprise workflows also. A lot of tasks actually break down into solving coding as a subroutine. For example, a VC that may be analyzing, say, two data rooms of two companies and figure out like which company to invest in. If you look at the raw data of those two companies and you're thinking about questions like, oh, which company is more efficient with their sales and marketing? Maybe you look at a number like magic number, right? And that it's not already in the data room, but if you model those coding, it can write a Python script to analyze the data and come up with like which company is more efficient in their sales and marketing spend. Also, for many search queries, coding is like in the loop in the query execution plan. For example, if you're asking a question like, what are some interesting trends in AI investing in 2026 and how is it different from 2025? If the model knows how to code, it will make the right API calls to PitchBook and Crunchbase. It'll write some Python code to and use like NumPy, Matplotlib to like analyze the data, plot some interesting graphs, and show it to you. The model is doing coding behind the scenes, but the average user that's asking a search engine or a general assistant, doesn't even think about it. And when we all know how important tool use is for AGI. When the model has mastered coding, it can create its own tools. It's literally the ask a genie for infinite wishes. So coding is really foundational. That's why we prioritized coding right at the start. And Turing's DNA is in coding. The second is enterprise. In enterprise, I think of it like this four-dimensional matrix. Think of every industry we know, like financial services, retail, healthcare, life sciences, etc. Think of the second dimension as every function, software engineering, finance, marketing, sales. Third dimension, every role in the org chart in that function. Fourth dimension, every workflow that a human goes through in that role. For example, as CFO, of a biotech company in the finance function might go through a workflow of preparing for a board meeting or creating monthly financials. Now, this workflow requires multimodality reasoning tool use and coding. And if you can solve that, you will basically automate every workflow in this four-dimensional matrix. That's like $30 trillion of digital knowledge work. And Hiten, Matthew, you had this fascinating conversation about all these layoffs happening at big tech companies. I think many of these companies have seen that. They know that there is significant model capability overhang where the models are capable of X, but today we are extracting X minus delta in value.
Yeah.
So they are just like putting their money where their mouth is. Like they know that it works and it does work. So I think there's going to be tremendous value creation in the enterprise side. Although we have to be thoughtful about job displacement and reskilling, training people, I just think companies are going to become smaller. Like we're used to the Andy Grove style of one person having a span of 5 to 8 reports. I think in the future, we'll go to one person having a span of 5 to 8 companies. In the limit, we're going to have people running 5 to 8 companies with maybe the human sticking in the EIN and all the other compliance stuff, but the agents running stuff. And Frontier STEM is, of course, helpful to accelerate scientific discoveries, discover new materials, cure diseases. So that's obviously of interest.
Yeah. So I have a ton of questions based on what you said. I'll ask one and then Hiten, I'll pass it off to you for any other questions you might have. I want to talk about RL first. Do you think, when you're talking about frontier sciences, STEM, when you're talking about coding, these are all verifiable domains for the most part, which is obviously gives the ability for you to do RL, reinforcement learning. How much of that is just like it just let me think what I'm trying to ask. But that kind of the coding is the right path because it is RLable, or is it just, hey, it just happens to be and it just makes it accelerate that much more quickly? Like where does is RL all you need?
I think you need two things. I think you need um, you need uh, uh, pre-training on all the world's knowledge, internet, throw all of humanity's books into that mix. You need a very strong pre-trained base model, and then you do RL. Um, so I heard somewhere that Ilya Sutskever's research program at OpenAI in 2014, I heard this in an interview, was we're going to build a generative model trained on the world's knowledge and then do RL on it. Right? That was a pithy sort of one sentence statement. It's fascinating today, a decade later, Ilya Sutskever's recipe is still what everybody's roughly following, right? We're just scaling up. Intelligence is log of compute. Like it's fascinating. So you need both. And Ilya used to say a good pre-trained model is halfway to anywhere. You need that. It's like it gets you a lot out of the box. And then you do RL. Now, RL is obviously it works well for coding and math, which are more easily verifiable. But it also works for other domains where you can create rubric-based evaluators. For example, you could there is this interesting paper from OpenAI called GDPVal, where they basically analyzed different industries, different occupations in that industry, and had a human come up with a real task. For example, a mechanical engineer coming up with a design for a coupler for an excavator. I'm just making it up, right? Maybe it's somebody that works at Caterpillar, right? Like they come up with a design for that. And here, the task is you create a real world artifact. You would create like a real world artifact. Maybe the real world artifact is like a CAD design or some other engineering drawing, right? Now, humans now create verifiers for those artifacts that teach the model how to tell if the quality of this artifact is good or not. Now, for code, it's very obvious. Did the piece of code compile? Did unit test pass? And for math, again, you can see if you're able to prove this or not. But for, let's say, a board deck that a CFO comes up with, you can still come up with some rubrics for evaluating the quality of that artifact. For example, you could say, hey, are the numbers correct? Does the math make sense? You can argue
that's Jonathan, that's sorry to interrupt. That's measuring the math portion of it, but if you're trying to measure the design or how well it conveys ideas, it's like a little bit fuzzier than does this piece of code compile? Does this math formula work, right? Isn't it a little bit different? Is that why we're seeing so much more acceleration in coding and sciences than other things like creative writing?
You're correct. It is fuzzier, but it still works. It still works. Yes, it's a different way of thinking about it. Because there can be more than one correct solution, and it's more of a continuous score rather than a binary, did it pass, did it fail? For example, I'll give you an example. Imagine somebody is drawing a systems diagram, like an engineering systems diagram for a software engineering project. And if I asked you to come up with a rubric for evaluating that engineering systems diagram, right? It may not be super obvious what you could do, right? Like, how do you detect if this diagram is correct or not, or a good diagram? But I thought about this for like a minute. Perhaps one thing you could do is have an LLM create a verbal description of this diagram, just looking at this diagram, and compare that verbal description to the rest of the supporting text that you have around the diagram. So and look at some sort of distance measure, like cosine similarity or some other distance measure between how you went from image to text and the text that you had. That would give you like a fuzzy measure of, is this diagram communicating the architecture that the prose is trying to communicate, right? For a sales meeting that happened, was it a good sales meeting? I can define a rubric that says, oh, was the talk time balanced? Was it 50-50? Did you have action items that come out of it? Did you objection handle things the right way based on the sales script that exists? Do you have the next meeting set up? And an LLM as a judge can parse that out from the transcript of a meeting. So there are more things that you can create verifiers for than might be immediately obvious. But you're right that code and math has a faster loop, and you can do it more automatically than with here you need kind of humans to come up with the rubric. For example, for this interview, we could come up with a rubric for how you might come up with a rubric. Okay, I wanted to cover these topics. Did I cover these topics or not? And we could fit it.
Got it.
So you're in the data business, right?
Yes.
Would you say that? So
Yes. Data and RL environment business. I mean, you can think of RL environments also as data, but we build RL environments for all types of enterprise workflows.
yeah, that makes sense. But without the data, it's not as valuable, right? Having an RL environment.
Correct.
Right? So I guess in your business, what do you believe is the future that keeps you folks competitive? I know a lot of folks say data is the moat and things like that. Since you're in the data business, I figured asking you that is probably a good thing. So would love to understand how you think about that.
What do you think keeps Turing competitive?
Yeah, like if you're in the data business and you're providing these RL environments, is data the moat? How do you stay competitive long term with that? And then the words that came to mind every time someone mentions RL, I go straight to just synthetic data, just as a thing, right? Because I've found a lot of success in my own sort of work with using synthetic data and finding ways to create very accurate or seemingly accurate synthetic data. So if data is a moat and we can make synthetic data, what does that mean for Turing? Like in particular, which really just means what does that mean for the future of data and RL environments, right?
Yeah. So I think data and deployment is the moat, not just data. And I think so firstly, let's talk about RL environments. When we ship an RL environment, we actually use a ton of synthetic data. We also try to create RL environments automatically as much as we can, but it's not fully automated. But an RL environment usually includes prompts, verifiers, and synthetic seed data with real expert humans who are designing these prompts and verifiers. So humans are involved in generating RL environments. It's not so automated. because you need these domain experts who know those enterprise workflows to come up with the prompts and verifiers and what's realistic seed data that you might want to have. And then we have a workflow that Dockerizes it and ships it to our customers. I would, one way I might phrase it slightly differently, Hiten, is let's call it human data and purely synthetic data.
Okay.
Right? And I would say like today's state of the art is that humans are involved quite heavily in almost all types of truly valuable data. There is some stuff that you can distill and train, use a stronger model to teach a weaker model. That stuff is fine. But to move a frontier model forward, you do need human data.
Right.
And I believe that the human data business will be alive and well for the next 20 years.
Jonathan, I want to jump in.
Yes.
It's so interesting what you're saying right now. Human data. So my understanding is that the frontier AI labs have almost completely saturated, or really have completely saturated, the amount of data on the internet, the human created data. And now we are only looking at maybe data behind paywalls, data behind auth walls, and like these are small sections of the internet. Is that true? And if like how do we continue creating human created data when AI is creating 1,000x more data than we could ever? Is it all going to be kind of based on synthetic data? And yeah, so like how does that look going forward? And have we used up all the human data so far?
No, we haven't. So I would say you're correct, Matthew, that we've eaten the internet and we've eaten all of the books and all the sort of licensable content. That data is done. Like the models have eaten all of that, right? The stuff that traditionally goes into pre-training, that's done. Right now, the data that's missing is two types of data. Number one, data that exists in the minds of smart humans, like Matt, like Hiten. This data has not gone into the models. So we need expert humans in every field of economic activity to be on platforms like Turing and generate that data. For example, Hiten, you were just talking about you having invested in 1,000 companies. If I asked you a question of how do you evaluate a founder, or what are the biggest risks a founder, biggest failure risks that a founder might have? I mean, you've been a successful serial entrepreneur before. Your answer is so rich, and you may not have written a detailed blog post on the internet that talks about your reasoning chain for evaluating a founder. And you're also learning and growing every day. Like your knowledge state also changes. The only way those tokens in your biological neural net make it to a model is if you're on a platform like Turing and we compensate you for your time, and we transfer intelligence from human minds into machine minds. We distill human knowledge and skills into LLMs. That's missing. That's why Turing's growing so fast, and we're hiring like these smart humans in every field of economic activity.
And
The
Jonathan,
second,
please continue.
so that's one type of data that the models haven't seen. The second type of data that the models haven't seen is deployment data, like real data. This is how Turing differentiates from other data vendors, because many of the data vendors in our industry just sell data to the labs. We don't just sell data to the labs, we build. We are like building systems with Goldman Sachs, Apollo, BlackRock, Pfizer, Pepsi, etc. And in real enterprise deployment, you see where these models fail. And there are unwritten business rules they don't understand. There are file formats they don't understand. As any of us that's actually used models and agents to do the work knows. Like I'm automating the CEO's job at Turing. Like I built like a crazy system with Claude Code. And I can tell you there are things that the models do well. There are things that they don't do well. The models have to touch reality for you to know where things break. And in consumer, we've done that. Like ChatGPT, Gemini are wonderful, right? And they have a nice feedback loop going. In enterprise, that feedback loop doesn't exist because you can round down the enterprise adoption to zero today, like in the S&P 500. Notwithstanding all the amazing work Anthropic, OpenAI, and other companies do, it's still like tiny. I talk to these enterprises all the time. There's so much more headroom for like what could be done versus what's done. That data is missing. So that's why Turing focuses on those two things. So number one, export human data on the platform. Number two, real operational data that comes when you deploy systems. And actually, there is a third. We have this, what's helpful is to have actual data from real companies. So Turing has this initiative called Project Lazarus, where we are buying dead companies, buying dead code bases. Like imagine all the email assets, Slack
That's
assets, code assets.
interesting.
We call it Project Lazarus because we are resurrecting the spirits of these dead companies.
Yeah, yeah.
There could be this company that maybe didn't have product market fit 10 years ago that died, but I think it's kind of neat that we are. I mean, there was some, probably some really hardworking founders who tried to do something that for some reason didn't work, but we're making sure that their intelligence lives on in GPT-20 or Grok 30 or Gemini 75. It's kind of cool.
Jonathan, I have dozens of failed projects I am more than willing to sell you.
That sounds great. So that
Uh,
future builders can learn from that. And
I love that idea. I'd never even considered that. I want to, one more thing. You were talking to Hiten and you were saying there are expert humans out there with a bunch of knowledge in their head that hasn't been transcribed into text, that hasn't been shared with the models yet. Does that put Meta and XAI in a uniquely distinct position to leverage their social networks in which tons of human data is being created every single day, tons of human knowledge is being transcribed every single day? Does that give them a distinct advantage? And why, I guess, perception wise, do they seem like they're behind?
uh, Firstly, I like all of the frontier AI labs. I
Of
think
course.
it's all of them, and I think we're still all relatively early. There's a long way to go. And it's also less, Matthew, about the quantity of data. It's about the quality of data. Uh, and what data that's high quality is data that breaks the models, where the models don't necessarily do a good job. So the social networks that you're talking about have an advantage in terms of more data that could go into pre-training. I mean, it's like another data source that's like not on the internet, but maybe it's proprietary, right? Like, so it could help there. But in terms of experts who can actually advance the models forward, like at Turing, we are hiring PhDs in physics, chemistry, math, biology from Stanford, Berkeley, MIT. We are hiring Stanford heart doctors. We are hiring like people with like 5 years of work experience in JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. These are like people at like very advanced roles. And at some point, there'll be a Netflix documentary on the last Turing trainer. And maybe it'll be Elon training, training the models. It'll be kind of cool. We'll have high revenue concentration. All our revenue is coming from Elon on Turing. That'll be kind of fun. So my point is there is 20 years worth of human data progress ahead of us. Every year, as the models get smarter, the type of human intelligence that needs to go in will change. But I don't think the need will go away until AI can do everything better than humans. Um, and at that time, I think I think we'll just be in a world of abundance and it'll be wonderful. And I still think like humans will be insanely creative, solve big problems. We'll just operate with massive leverage.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you're an optimist, because, obviously there's a lot of discussion about AI automating jobs away, but it sounds like you're hiring experts more than ever. So we're not quite there yet. And yeah, glad to hear you're an optimist. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining the show. You can find Jonathan on X at John Sid, JONSIDD, and go get hired at Turing, turing.com, and go sell your failed projects to them as well. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
coming
man.
on, Jonathan.
Thanks, Hiten.
All right. So super, super interesting. I could have probably asked him 1,000 more questions. Synthetic data just feels a little wonky to me just because it's all derivative. And if it's derivative, are there truly novel ideas coming out of synthetic data? So I've been thinking a lot about that. But then I don't know if you saw this, Heaton. Jensen was just on Lex Friedman's podcast, and he was talking about synthetic data and how, yeah, that's certainly the future, and how really most data, even human written, is synthetic in some form. It's some regurgitation or derivative of existing ideas. So it's interesting to think about.
I think what Jonathan described it as was we might make synthetic data, but we're using human judgment to judge the synthetic data. That's kind of the workflow that I heard. I kind of asked him that to hear how he thought about it and if he's thinking about it that way. He's also in the business of selling human data as well, but also the environments. So I thought one of the most fascinating things about how he described it and his thinking about it is that there is always the way I would say what he said about synthetic data versus new data or versus data or human data is that there's always new data being created. And right now they're at that kind of not last mile, but they're at that place where all the data has been consumed by the models. And so the most relevant data, if you want human data, is new data or old data that was hidden away that has not been consumed. So the Project Lazarus, I've had a million questions about that from him because I've heard
We'll have
a
to
lot
bring
of
it back on.
I've actually heard a lot of startups entertain that. And even the labs directly coming to them and saying, hey, you're shutting down. Can we buy your data?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
so I think it's a business, actually. There's something interesting there.
very, very interesting. And Hiten, since you invested in 1,000 startups, I'm sure, some of them failed. You should go back to them and say like, hey, you can go sell your proprietary data. It is so fascinating to think about. All right, let's cover a few more stories before we call the show.
Let's do it.
Alex, will you bring up, thank you. So on the kind of flavor of AI automating humans away, and we saw Block right before we brought on Jonathan had, cut a big portion of their workforce a couple weeks ago. We see Meta laying folks off. We see Oracle laying folks off. But then on the flip side, we have OpenAI and Anthropic hiring more than ever. And so Jensen weighed in on this. Jensen Huang just called out every CEO has been firing people because of AI. He said, why, Jim Cramer asked him why companies are laying people off if AI is supposed to make everyone more productive. Jensen's answer, for companies with imagination, you will do more with more. For companies where the leadership is just out of ideas, they have nothing else to do. They have no reason to imagine greater than they are. When they have more capability, they don't do more. And I think this is spot on. I forget who told me this, but he asked me a question. Are all the problems in the world solved? And if the answer is no, you can keep growing as a company, right? And I think that was just so accurate. And it just makes me think about these layoffs are really a ZERP era bloat trimming more than anything. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Heaton. Do you agree with this? Is there infinite market for a company that is smart and imaginative, to use Jensen Huang's word, aggressive? What do you think?
I almost feel like he's speaking to his management principles more than he's speaking to anyone else's management or leadership, because I think he believes this to be true. The only piece I would criticize on a statement like this is it's missing the human coordination tax that causes the companies to not be able to do more with more. And his management principles are focused around figuring out how to do more with more without having that coordination task. I mean, he's been out there saying he has 40 direct reports. He doesn't do one-on-one. So it almost feels like his company and the way he thinks about running companies is maybe even more forward thinking than most folks out there. And it's been like that for a while. So if you apply his management system to these companies that are sort of, laying off folks and all that, and them blaming AI for it, which I know you and I have had some discussions about this, so we should probably dive into that. Like, he's just saying it's not AI.
Yeah.
He's basically saying there's a coordination problem at these companies and they need to lay off these people, not because of AI. So I think what Jensen is saying is actually what's underneath it, which is the fact that these companies just blew up too fast. And, if you were to really having seen this firsthand now, working at a large company, having seen it from friends of mine working at some of these companies that are doing layoffs, I think the simple truth is that for whatever reason, tech was consistently incentivized around doing more. And if you're an individual in there, you're doing more so that you get promoted. You're not necessarily doing more to add value for the company or even the world. You're actually just doing more because the way that the system incentivized you is for your own promotions. And those promotions are designed around your manager and what your manager can get, responsibility for, and then what you can kind of do, and then how their manager kind of incentivizes them in that way. So you're almost dealing with this sort of baggage from the way companies are run. So to me, when I read this, I'm like, yeah, hey, Jensen, like you operate a company very differently, at least from what you've shared and this statement that you're saying, than other people do. And in some ways, the layoffs might be helping these companies operate more like Jensen. And it might have very little to do with AI and has more to do with the tax that's been on us since the promotions and the incentives all got aligned around sort of people looking out for themselves, because that's just the way the incentives were structured inside of these companies by the time you had layers and layers of management.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I look at Block, especially laying off 50%. There's just no way they're just thinking, oh, well, we're operating so differently now because of AI. We're going to lay off half of our people. That it is like so clearly fat trimming, and maybe not everybody was performing up to par, and they could get more out of them at a different company. But it's interesting. I think about an essay that Balaji put out a few months ago, in which he said, AI models are incredibly good at middle to middle, but they are certainly not end-to-end automators yet. And at the edges of that end-to-end are humans, both in prompting and verifying. And so although the middle that AI can automate is growing, so are the edges, right? Even though the middle is growing, the entire pie is growing, and now the edges are growing as well, which means you're going to need more humans to help manage that. And Balaji, his whole point was these AI models have, like, he cannot foresee a future in which they can do things end to end. Now, obviously, if we're talking about 100 years in the future, maybe, but certainly not within the next decade, maybe not the next 2 decades. So it's very interesting to think about. And it's the same thing. If there are market opportunities, a company can go after them with more leverage than ever with AI now. And so I agree. I just think these companies lack imagination, and or they were already planning to do it, and AI is a great scapegoat in which to blame the firings on.
I think that's the latter, and that's the thing Jensen can't say out loud, so he said this, right? It's like you were bloated. So you might have lacked imagination the entire time that you were bloated as an organization, and everything was fine because the markets were fine and they were serving you well. When you added more revenue, your market cap went up. These days, when you add more revenue, your market cap doesn't necessarily go up anymore, right? Even when you like beat earnings and things like that, because the attention is going towards what can AI do for us and all that. But I do want to highlight one thing that I wanted to discuss with you, specifically based on what Jonathan said. So he said one thing that really kind of was a very strong data point to me, which is like, even he said something to the order of, even though there's all this Anthropic, Claude, OpenAI, and all that at companies, we're still not seeing the sort of realization of what that has what the potential is of that technology in the work environment. He was literally saying it's like zero. He's literally saying, even with all of, like, this is what I heard. Again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I wanted to talk to you about this because, we could talk to him about it. I think we got his perspective, but I wanted to talk to you about it in particular because I'm really curious what you think about AI adoption inside of these companies and what he said, because that means that there's an unlimited room of deploying AI at companies, period. And wow, well, how is Anthropic making so much money then?
Okay, I have so much to say about this. I actually had to write a few notes. I think there are two things happening in parallel on this. So one, he mentioned model overhang. And you know what? You can, Alex, take us off the screen, screen share for this. He talked about model overhang first, which is this concept that the core intelligence of the models are incredible, but the scaffolding, the harness around them is still being built out. And we have so much more uh, expertise and value and capability to extract from the current generation of AI models just from building out the scaffolding. So that's number one. The second thing is the enterprise deployment. That's what you touched on. And I could not agree more. I have many friends in enterprise. I talk to enterprise directly, and like they're still trying to figure out they've probably all or pretty much all deployed ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
But they are just scratching the surface on what's possible for automation and agents. And Heaton, you and I could probably talk about agents for an hour after this. But the point is, the stuff we're doing, because we're on the frontier of seeing what agents are capable of, we're still scratching the surface, let alone what the enterprises are doing, which is not even scratching the surface yet. So I think these two things happening in parallel, which is there's so much more harness and scaffolding to be built, and then taking that and showing enterprise actually how to do it. There's just like enterprise has a long way to go, to put it blandly.
Yeah, I think there's just a big gap between, I mean, you know, you mentioned this earlier, and I've talked to some people about this recently. You mentioned that like Claude and the team there just keeps shipping new stuff every day, right?
Yeah.
The number of people that I've talked to, like literally 100% of the people I've talked to that use it are like, they are shipping so much. I don't even know how to keep up and even use any of the new stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm
Totally.
like, they're shipping all this amazing stuff. I try to use as much of it as I can. A lot of the things I'm noticing that they're shipping are things that people like you and me have either been doing or playing with somehow. And then they incorporate it fairly quickly into the core Cowork or Claude
Well,
Code product with
that's
the
the meme, right? They're building OpenClaw.
yeah. OpenClaw, a bunch of other little tricks that I've seen. I've seen
Yeah.
them implement from like some random open source, thing I saw. So it's really impressive how they're thinking about it. But then I don't think they're meeting the market yet, because the market is sitting there saying, and the market of their users is sitting there and saying, "Wow, I can do all this, but how do I do it?"
Yeah.
And I think we're hitting a world where like that gap. I thought we were gonna like. I guess it makes sense why it's widening. I think it's widening and it's not narrowing, because the more that the technology can do, the more that it can do.
Yep.
But then the more there is opportunity to go implement it, and then you kind of get stuck. I think even like there's even like and this is something I know you've experienced because we've talked about it, but like I I find it really wild that like if I'm right on the edge of trying to improve a workflow or do something, within a few days or a week, I'll see something that I had figured out, and now it's either productized or put in something else, and I'm like, oh, so it's almost like there's this collective sort of set of folks, whoever they are, that are trying to live on the edge and try to bring that more to more and more people. And I don't know if it's just, oh, basically what I'm trying to say is I think there's an unlimited capacity, and gap, and the gap is widening, and I don't actually think that's a problem. I think that's just the nature of the technology that we're dealing with.
Yeah. I'm going to double down on what you said. The gap is widening. And let's tie it to how fast Anthropic is shipping. I don't know another company on the face of the earth that is shipping as fast as they are. And there's a reason for that. Because they are on the frontier of deploying the technology internally, right? Enterprise companies outside of Anthropic and maybe a couple others, they're not even close. So not only is Anthropic deploying the stuff internally, but that allows them to ship more quickly. That allows them to then deploy it back more quickly. And it's kind of that flywheel that we were talking about earlier. And it's clear that they have figured it out. Now, when they start to document it and create training programs and education and some of the stuff that we're doing on this channel, like enterprises will start getting those crumbs, and then they'll start kind of deploying more and understanding how to use these technologies to do more. But the gap for now is absolutely widening because they've figured out how to leverage their own technology to do things better, more quickly, more efficiently. And it's just this incredible flywheel that I've not seen any in my, 20 plus history and being in Silicon Valley. I've never seen anything like it.
You know what came to mind? I know you've sold to enterprise before and built products for enterprise. I have too, and maybe more than I want to admit. And like one of the funniest things is they hate it. They meaning the person who's reliant on a workflow or a product. They hate it when the product changes. So I think there's something really interesting to be said about a different type of gap, which is a more traditional gap, which is like basically if you change the interface on enterprise that they're used to, and you don't give them enough change management of like the old one, you could still go back to it. And new. That's why even folks like Basecamp will let you go back to the old one. They're not even enterprise, like 37 Signals with their products. They'll let you go back to the old one because they're UX folks and they're folks that care about like that experience. So I think there's almost like a few different levels or different kinds of this overhang. And one of them is a UX overhang even because, and like Anthropic with their Claude product, they'll ship something, call something, then they'll change it in a week. They'll change it a week later. The enterprise today doesn't know how to consume that, and digest it, and then deploy it inside of their companies. And it's not like Anthropic has enough humans to help them do that. Maybe that's why OpenAI is going and saying, hey, we're going to double our headcount this year, right?
Adaptability as a skill set is becoming more and more valuable. And that's something that I'm thinking about. How do I teach my kids, right? How do I teach my kids about adaptability? How do I teach them to be curious and to explore and to think about what other things, what can I change about myself? What can I change about my work? Obviously, they're not working yet, but like, how do I get them in that mentality? And so when you look at an Anthropic or you look at an OpenAI, and they're just the way that they develop software is completely different than anybody else, even other companies on the frontier. It's just very different. And I talk to folks at other software companies, more legacy software, enterprise software. They're reluctant to adopt some of these techniques. And so I've even, I'm not trying to, talk shit about companies, but I think some of them are a lot of them are still writing code by hand, which is like, for us on the frontier, it just seems absolutely wild to think like, oh, I'm still writing code by hand. And I think they're just very reluctant and very unwilling to adapt to what is clearly the current state, let alone the future. So you're right. There's this premium being put on adaptability, I think, now. And so as you think about as an entrepreneur, as whoever's watching as an entrepreneur, as you're thinking about who you're hiring next, think about adaptability as a core skill set. And how do you even interview for that?
I think the hack a lot of folks like at Rippling, Parker Conrad at Rippling and other folks have done is we're just going to hire founders. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, a lot of what you said about what you want to teach your kids and all that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Matthew, the founder talking, right? Because a founder gets used to change. Once you're in it for a few years, you're like, oh, change? What is that word? Yeah. I have to deal with that way more than I want to, but that's reality. I think everyone is a founder in that sense where you have to get used to dealing with this change. And I love the idea of adaptability because I think that's what it is. But organizationally, like the organization has to be adaptable. And I think that's where the challenges are going to be on the next step. Another thing that Jonathan said that I thought was worthy of some discussion was, and it clicked for me even more when he said it, probably because of the way he said it and how he's describing it. But I found it really fascinating, and this relates to a lot of the discussions we've had today, that he was basically saying that coding impacts all the other work too, in a positive way, when the models get better at coding. So if you think about it like that, then it's like Anthropic likely, potentially, accidentally, with their focus on coding, figured out how to make LLMs better faster by just focusing on coding. to your point about the recursive loops too, but also the fact that if it impacts other areas, and his thesis of how systematic coding is or needs to be and all that stuff is probably the reason why, because if you've done any kind of fuzzy area that's not as binary as coding, like product or marketing or sales or any of that stuff, the more systematic you are, the more repeatable whatever you're doing is. And so that really clicked for me there. So I was just curious what that brought up for you, because I think that's another interesting piece that I hadn't really connected in the same way. And I can see why OpenAI is really pushing for code, and even XAI, they're pushing for code right now, because it feels like that is actually a true unlock. And I'm not sure if everyone realized that. I'm not even sure if Anthropic, I wouldn't expect Anthropic to have understood that earlier, but I think their revenue and their current traction is probably them realizing it now, or last 6 months or whatever.
I suspect they were probably the first of the frontier labs to realize it, and then OpenAI certainly realized it, but it takes a little bit to start to kind of reorient the training ship around this, like, hey, let's focus on code and let's start uh, defocusing on areas that aren't as important. And so yeah, I think you're 100% right. Code, he mentioned Mark Andreessen's "Software is Eating the World" essay. AI is eating software, thus AI is eating the world. So I think that's kind of the nice bow to put on that. Alex, can you pull up my screen? Let's talk about a couple more stories. This is a very Anthropic heavy episode, by the way. Hiten, we don't usually talk about Anthropic as much, but look, they're everywhere right now. So let's keep on with the theme. This is Tariq. He is on the Claude Code team. He's the one making all the announcements about all the different features that they release every single day. Now, this announcement was not as positive. So, to manage growing demand for Claude, we're adjusting our 5-hour session limits for free, pro, max subs during peak hours. Your weekly limits remained unchanged. So, what is the actual gist? This is it. You'll move through your 5-hour session limits faster than before, aka they are lowering their quota. And like, as somebody who blows through their quota all the time, this hit me directly. Now, I think the interesting thing is we've landed a lot of efficiency wins to offset this, but 7% of users will hit the session limits they wouldn't have before. I guarantee you, I am in that 7%. I guarantee you, Hiten, you are in that 7% because of the way that we use agents with our Claude subscriptions. That's really who they're targeting with this update. Now, there's a lot here, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but I think the question I'm asking is this because their demand is just surging, and is this because they don't have enough GPUs?
I don't think they've ever had enough GPUs. If you use the product, especially the consumer product, enough, not even Claude Code, I don't consider that exactly the consumer product, but Claude Code, Claude Cowork, I know it's consumer, but the core product, if you use it a bunch, like for what you would use ChatGPT for, you see a lot of limits and a lot of things that you normally just don't feel right. They don't feel like that the team would have intentionally wanted the product to work that way. It's hitting limits here and there and all that stuff. So I think the first thing is we're GPU constrained. They are definitely GPU constrained. And then if you look at all the charts of their revenue growing and the demand is incredible for them. So, but the thing that Tariq said here that kind of got me to your point too about who they're targeting is if you run token intensive background jobs. And so it's almost like, and again, I don't know the solution to this, but this is what came to mind. How many of those token intensive background jobs are actually valuable? So are they really just attacking value in a really weird way? Because I don't know how to, there's so many people I know, engineers, non-engineers, that have dozens of projects that are not complete, but they're halfway done. And I think this is kind of a form of that, which is, are those background jobs really worthy of running? Should they run? And that's, I think, underneath this, I feel like the real problem is we're running things, we're using these tokens in ways that maybe we don't need to, and we shouldn't be. And there's waste. And I don't know if anyone wants to admit that or say it because it goes back to their own judgment, their own taste, their own motivations, all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of what I feel underneath this, especially as I talk to more people about how excited they get with starting stuff. I mean, this is why companies like Lovable have such high churn. People get really excited to create, but then it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And then eventually they realize, oh, I've been paying Lovable for 2 or 3 months or 4 months or whatever. Why am I paying them? I just built this thing and I want it, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Wait, do I really need the thing? And
Yeah,
then they
and
delete it.
I mean, as a multi-time founder yourself, this is kind of a sentiment in Silicon Valley for a long time. First of all, ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is everything. And it now seems like building the software wasn't really enough. That's kind of just an extension of idea, right?
It's
Building
wild.
software is now meaningless. How you actually have to build, to quote YC, build stuff people want. So once you actually build the software, the hard part starts. How do you position it in the market? How do you get feedback quickly? How do you market it? How do you talk to your customers? And um, it seems like that is now back more than ever. When everything up until the point where you actually have to do the hard work becomes much easier, people are realizing, oh dang, yeah, we actually do have to go out and talk to customers.
And I think that this problem they're having and that we have around this is never ending. And the reason I say that is like if the models get better, then the magic of the models is going to feel more magical for us, which means we're just going to pour more energy, more time, and more tokens at trying to build stuff. And of course, these folks have kind of caused the problem by giving us all these tools and toys and even ways to automate, right?
Yeah.
So I really wonder where we go here if we're GPU constraint and that's the reason they're doing it. But I think the reason that there is this shortage, so to speak, or implied shortage or implied limits they need to put, or explicit limits, is because we're just using the stuff irresponsibly, if I were to really put it out there.
Yeah.
But no one can control that, right? Because what are they going to do? Give you less capabilities? No. Make it so that you can't automate things? Because in a way, all this burning of tokens, if it were done against their API, not against these subscriptions, a lot of people would probably not be burning the tokens, and Anthropic would be getting paid even more because they're doing this on the subscriptions.
By the way, the whole notion that they are not beholden to have any transparency on how the calculation works on the quota and can just manually adjust it with zero transparency about how it actually works, that's crazy to me. You can't do that to enterprise, first of all. So this isn't going to affect enterprise. This is going to affect consumers, tinkerers, developers like
But
us.
But enterprise doesn't have these options. They're paying on a API basis,
That's
if I'm
right.
not mistaken.
Yeah,
So
they're paying premium for their
yeah,
tokens.
if you're on enterprise, you're paying full on, right? And it's just, oh, more usage, we'll charge you more. But the quality of the usage is where we're, I think, going to see. I already think we have a quality of usage problem, period. It's much easier to manage once you realize that we just spent $1,500 on these tokens that we shouldn't have, right? And then you stop it. So I wonder, like, how that all shakes out. But yeah, your point, like, it's just this is where we're at, and the usage thing. Let me talk to that for a quick second. I was talking to folks that know about pricing and credits and stuff like that, and like experts in pricing. It's just a topic I'm always interested in, as nerdy or weird as it sounds, and especially SaaS pricing and all that, especially now with credits. And one of the things that one of the experts kind of really like said, expert meaning done the research, looked at psychology of how people pay and all that. So things like that. He basically said these folks can charge whatever they want in whatever way they want, and people are just likely to pay because there's only a few of them. And right now, Claude, with everything we can do and the features they have, it's definitely looking different than ChatGPT. So they can do whatever they want. Because what I was asking was like, hey, they charge this way. And I was complaining about the usage limits and all that because I was complaining to someone who's a pricing expert that could probably help me understand, hey, does this make sense or not? And all he said back to me is they can charge whatever way they want. So whatever they're doing, there is nothing to learn there. I'm like,
Is
oh,
this has this happened before where there's like you just get a quota and we're not even going to tell you how it works? Is that, I've never seen that before, but maybe it exists and I just haven't seen it. Can you think of any companies?
Have we ever had something that's like water, right? Like we just turn it on and we expect it. And when it doesn't work, we're like, wait, it's broken. Can
Totally.
you go fix it? Right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but
yeah.
in this case, we're getting charged for it, but we get charged for water too at our water usage. So in reality, I think what's going on, if I were to really push it, is that inference is still too expensive. I think that's the issue because it's not like water, and it's not like electricity either. But the products that are giving it to us make us feel like it's that faucet we can just turn on anytime we want, right? Like
Yeah.
you can go in Claude Code right now, type something up, and expect it to work. Just like when you turn on the water, you expect the water to work. You turn on the light switch, you expect it to work. So, and again, I know where I'm going with this, right? Like you can start seeing it, which is this just a utility? And I know that Sam Altman and Dario and others have kind of, I don't know if Dario has, but have kind of hinted at some of that. And I know everyone likes to talk about UBI, but that's very idealistic at the moment. So I wonder if it's just like water. And I wonder if at some point it's so cheap that it's going to feel like water and electricity to us. And that's where we're going.
I suspect we're going to have a spectrum of quality and price for different types of tokens, different
Fair.
quality of token. I think that's where we're going. Okay, let's show the counter to this strategy. And of course, OpenAI took no time at all to capitalize on this. Tebow, Codex on the OpenAI team. Hello. Basically, within hours of that announcement, we have reset Codex usage limits across all plans to let everyone experiment with the magnificent plugins we just launched. And because it has been a while being about a week, you can just build unlimited things with Codex, have fun. Now,
Whoa.
Codex and specifically Tebow has made these quota reset announcements seemingly every other day. And so like they saw the opportunity. Oh, Anthropic, you're gonna start throttling quota, limiting quota. All right, we got you. Come on back to Codex. Check out what we have. Keep going. We're gonna reset your quotas. So this is it's just so interesting, and maybe this is they have more compute. Maybe this is a cultural thing. Maybe this is we're willing to subsidize the tokens at a more aggressive rate than Anthropic would be. So what do you think? What's going
I
on
got a
there?
few things for you. That I think number one, they're trying to get the crazy people like us that have our open clause set up with Claude to be set up with Codex instead. I think that's like straight up. If you're on Twitter saying this is who you're speaking to a great extent, right? People like us are like, oh yeah, I'll go. Like I didn't have a bot set up with Codex until like 3 or 4 weeks ago, which is really weird because I have a bunch of Claude accounts all set up with different stuff, and I'm a big ChatGPT user or have been until OpenClaw, and now I have one with
Yeah.
set up with Codex, right? The other thing I wanted to say, another random data point is one of the engineers I work with pinged me 3 days ago, and he's like, "Hey, I think we need to use Codex more." And I was like, "Okay," like because we've been using Claude Code, have a max account or two, and he's like, "Yeah, I think we can do a lot more with it." And why do you think he's saying that? He said that because of this kind of stuff. So in my little anecdotal world where we've been 80, 90% Claude Code in that business, the engineer is telling me, hey, let's go get a max account for this business and let's go max it out, so to speak, or a Claude, I'm sorry, a Codex account or a ChatGPT account so we can use that. So I think there's, to me, anecdotally, that feels like the strategy is smart on their end and it's working. But back to your point, I'm not sure if we know why Anthropic is throttling and OpenAI is not. And in fact, OpenAI is going the other way. And it's probably simply like you said, they can. And Anthropic might not be able to.
Yeah.
But
Look,
they have all those TPUs coming from Google, don't they?
who does?
Anthropic, I believe.
I think so.
They have a deal, right? And I think Google's even like kind of bummed out about the deal from something I read in the news. Anyway, I don't have the news, so maybe we shouldn't get into that. But
So GPT 5.4 is excellent, but Opus 4.6 is just
okay.
I just have an affinity to it that I don't have for GPT 5.4. A lot of people talk about 5.4 being better at coding now through codecs, maybe, but like there is nothing like hitting that fast Opus 4.6 fast max thinking and just seeing the tokens spit out. And oh man, I just love it. Now, to just put the bow on this story. So, Daniel Stiegman, formerly of Klein, now works at OpenAI as a response, a reply to Tariq's message. Thank you. That's all he had to say. Tariq handled it with grace. Lots of demand for agentic coding to go around. Excited to see what you guys ship next. Took the high road. Daniel, not so much. I love it. It's so funny to me.
He could have just said you're welcome. That would have
Yeah.
been fun. But funnier. But like, yeah, I mean, they're good. You know what? Competition is always great for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that way. I feel that way with the leapfrog of model quality every other week. But you know what? I think this is actually quite reflective of the cultures of both companies. Anthropic, very much like tunnel vision. We're getting to AGI and super
Yep.
intelligence. We're not going to focus on anything else. Daniel and OpenAI team, hyper competitive. Like, oh, you dropped the ball a little bit? We'll pick it up for you, buddy. So I just thought that was really fun.
That's awesome.
All right, Alex, you could take us off screen. I think we're going to wrap up the show right there. Hiten, thank you so much for joining today. Really, really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Want to thank everybody. So I'm just looking for my notes. Want to thank our guest, Jonathan Siddharth, founder and CEO of Turing. Go check out Turing.com. Thank you to everybody who watched. Please go follow us on X. Go follow us on other social networks at Forward Future. Hiten, where do they find you?
I'm on Twitter at HNSHAH, and I'm lucky enough to have my firstname.com. So it's Hiten.com, where I'm
Oh, dang.
just running experiments and doing stuff and sharing it. And can I blow up your spot, Matt? You know what I'm about to say?
Maybe.
I'm not going to sing. It's Matt's birthday, everyone.
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
not going to sing. I almost did it, but I'm not going to sing because then I'd just be singing.
Yeah,
But either way,
that's right.
happy
We would sit
birthday.
here- We would sit here
Happy
awkwardly.
birthday.
Thank you, Hiten. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a blast as always. Thanks. You're gonna have to co-host again. Follow us forwardfuture.ai as well for our newsletter, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.